All right, everybody, the bell ring. I can't hear you. Can you guys hear me? Wave if you can hear me. Okay. Um, so I can't hear you guys, but that's probably okay, right? As long as you can hear me. Let's start out. Let's say the pledge as we do every day in first hour. Let's just do this thing. All righty. I pledge allegiance to the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great, fantastic. Okay, so once again, let's just kind of rock and roll. We've got so much to do today. It's one of those weeks that I wish we'd had a couple more weeks before this week happened. We just need time to cover a lot of material. But when history is happening, you have to stop and participate in history. That's just especially when it has to do with the Constitution and the how the Constitution is enforced by the Senate and the House. It doesn't get any bigger than this in terms of checks and balances. This is like the ultimate check and balance that there is. It also shows something I've been telling you guys. I'm writing a letter of recommendation there. You can see for a student, but listen. Here's the thing: you'll never see this happen again in your lifetimes, where we have two impeachment trials in the Senate in 1 year. That'll never happen again. These will be the kinds of things that they will have huge volumes of books about, and political scientists will be arguing the ramifications of this for the next numbers of decades. So this is like the moment, right? I mean, this would be a little bit like when I was down in your age group when Nixon resigned. I mean, it's just one of those things that you never forget. But first, let's get on to some good news. And just do a little bit to keep thinking about our research papers. And we have really brought down the infection rate. Now let's hope the Super Bowl doesn't turn that up again, and we have a more contagious strains coming from England and South America and South Africa that we hope doesn't bend this curve back up. But 100 days of mask wearing right here is when the inauguration happened. Here's January, right? January 20th. So we were at our peak, and 100 days of mask wearing, new rules, new people just jumping in and doing their part. We got to save a lot of lives here, and it's working. And so let's just keep it up, right? Keep it up. So 20 days into the mask wearing, 80 days more to go. Let's see if we can make a dent in that. Now, again, none of this matters at all unless it impacts us here in Utah, right? We care about our state. We care about the people in our state. I'm keeping this now on a weekly basis. I'll take these pictures every Sunday. January 30th, this was 10 days into the Biden administration. We had 172 doses administered, only 15,000 that were second dose. So that was a 0.5%. It's grown. By February 1st, we got up to, let's see if I got the right date there. Yeah, February 1st, we had 300,000 with 63,000. It gives us to a 1.99. Now, yesterday, we were at 404,000. That's 99,000 Utahns with the second dose. That's almost 100,000. We get to a million here in Utah. That's about our share of the 100 million doses nationwide. We're up to 3.14%. It's still not fast enough, but it's a lot better than it was just a few weeks ago, as you can see by the data. How's Biden doing? Well, this is the Gallup poll. And the reason I use Gallup is they've been tracking presidential approval ratings since the 1930s. So they have this historic database of every president, starting actually with Truman, was the first one they asked this question to. And we have data, consistent data from one company showing the approval rating. Now, there are lots of different, polling groups and organizations do their own. And they're all, valid and important in different ways. But this is the one that historically gives us our marker. So in the first 13 days of the Biden administration, he had a 61% approval rating. Now that's really good. This means he's got a key term here, a honeymoon period going on. Normally, that's what we do with our presidents. We give them the first 100 days, basically. Well, we're just all hopeful, and we hope they're successful. And we're, of course, we're all, wanting that to happen. And so we give them a benefit of the doubt. And now all presidents will drop at some point. So it won't stay at 61%. It's going to drop down. But that's because he's doing things. And some people may like those things, some people may not. So we'll keep our eye on that one. So that's the first poll coming from Gallup on his approval rating. That's why it's just a flat line, because it's only been one poll. Okay, so now let's kind of move ahead. We're looking at some really important stuff going on in our country this week. I wish we weren't. I wish we were just going through normal. Normal feels really good. Normal is, when everything's going well, it's not a controversy. We just go on with our lives and we take the next step. But unfortunately, that's not the way it works, okay? Because this has become a real interesting thing. You guys remember, and everybody got this question, right? Where does life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness come from? It comes from Jefferson's writing of the Declaration of Independence. But to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And how do you get that consent? Through the vote. And the vote is really what was at issue here that led to the insurrection on January 6th. So this is the thing. We have a constitution which sets out the rule of law, which allows states to control the vote. And the states did. We walked through that before. You know the process. They had a month to recount, make sure it was accurate. But then all of a sudden, we have this thing that happens on the 6th of January. Now, I taught you these terms before. I'm just putting it up here to remind you what conspiracy is. In criminal law, conspiracy is agreement between two or more persons to commit a crime at some time in the future, and it can carry up to a 20-year sentence. Lesser charges: trespass, vandalism, assault, illegal possession of firearms and explosives. You can't carry weapons and guns into the nation's capital. It's just not, building. It's not allowed. And then we still don't. I think we know who was responsible for Officer Secknick's death. Haven't seen that, but I'm going to teach you some really important terms here now. These terms matter, okay? Because Americans jump to conclusions. And they immediately think if somebody's arrested or charged with something, that they're immediately guilty. And that's not the way the Constitution works. You guys have already had a chance to look at Amendments 4, 5, and 6, and 8. You kind of know what they're about. But basically what they say is you're innocent until proven guilty. You have to be proven guilty, right? Now, if somebody does an act and gets arrested, well, that's important because, we got to find out what's going on and see if somebody poses a danger to the community. So people are arrested, but when they're arrested, we don't say they're guilty. This is one of the problems Americans have. We consider an indictment, which is a charge. We consider an arrest to be guilt, and it's not. The whole Constitution, the Bill of Rights, 4 through 8, were written to preserve the rights of the accused. Clearly, let me say that again. They were written to preserve the rights of the accused against unreasonableness, against becoming maybe political fodder, or becoming something, being accused of something, a crime they didn't commit. We've had numerous people. There were 18 people on death row in Illinois that when DNA evidence became available, we found out they didn't do it. They were innocent. We try to make sure before someone goes to jail or pays a fine that the trial is fair. So we use the term alleged, and you're going to hear the term alleged a lot. It goes along with this innocent till proven guilty thing. Alleged without being proven yet, right? It's got to go to a court of law. To have alleged without yet being proven to have taken place or to have broken a specific law. So it's an allegation. All right, where do we get the term indictment? Indictment, what happens if someone's arrested, say this person here, and they're arrested, okay? And I'm not saying this person's guilty or whatever, they're just in trial, right? It's just probably a TV court case here. But at any rate, indicted, there is a grand jury hearing for federal charges. 20 people in secret hear some of the evidence, And they determine, and the reason it's in secret, because you don't want to have things said about a person only to have them be innocent. So you don't want to besmirch someone's character. So the first phase is a grand jury hearing of 20 people where some evidence is presumed there, and the jury of 20 is asked to vote on reasonable cause. Is there reasonable cause to charge this person with a crime? That's all their job is. Look at the evidence and say, okay, do we charge this person with a crime? Now, they then vote, and it's got to be unanimous. And if they're charged, then they should stand. They should stand for a public trial if they're charged. Okay, that's when it becomes public. It becomes public because now everybody needs to know and tell you why. So that the person who's accused, the alleged person, right? Everybody gets to see the process to see if the process is fair. That's really important. You do it in secret until you charge because you don't want to besmirch someone's character wrongly. But once you charge, you're saying there's reasonable cause, reasonable suspicion that this person did this. We have enough evidence for that. So they're charged. So they stand for a public trial. Now, the first phase of that trial is to plead. So basically they're asked, are you guilty or innocent? If you say guilty, you immediately go to the sentencing phase and the judge then issues a sentence. Usually what happens is there's a plea agreement. And that plea, this is most cases are just right here. They plead guilty, they agree to maybe lesser charges. They don't have to go through a trial or whatever. And usually the judge will cut them some sort of break if they seem contrite, if they seem like they feel bad about what they did. If they look like they've been a good citizen in the past, they'll take all that into their thought process before they issue a sentence of, say, jail time or a fine. Now, if they say I'm innocent, then that person goes to trial. That trial is a trial by 12. Now, the states are different and federal government's different than the states, but in federal trial, it's 12. Now, this is where you have to present all of the evidence. And you have to be found guilty by a jury of 12 unanimously beyond a reasonable doubt. There's always going to be some doubt. You can never know 100% for sure, but you can know 99.9% sure. And that's what we call beyond a reasonable doubt. So to charge somebody, you have to have reasonable cause, but to send them to jail, the jury of our peers, these are just people selected random. You will probably do jury duty sometime in your life. I've done it before. It's actually very instructive. I would encourage you to do jury duty. It's, by the way, one of your, listen carefully. It's one of your responsibilities of citizenship that's on the state test, just suggesting you might want to remember that. If you're asked to do jury duty, you should go do jury duty. Okay, so beyond a reasonable doubt, then if they're found guilty, they are then sentenced, okay? And okay, so the reason they're no longer alleged criminals now, they are convicted criminals or convicted felons or convicted of misdemeanor. They are convicted. So you don't use the word alleged anymore. It's been proven in a court of law. All right, with that process outlined, these are the people. Now remember what I said, and I hope you listened to me when I said this, because a lot of people blew this way out of proportion. They didn't hear everything I said here. This was never thousands of people leading this charge to the Capitol. It was always a few hundred at most conspirators. They've charged, I believe right now, now let's go back and look at our chart here. So go back here a phase. They have charged. That meant they've had a grand jury present enough evidence and a jury has found reasonable cause to charge them. They were arrested after the fact. I don't think very many were arrested that day. They took the video evidence, all of that. They went to a trial. They indicted them. Reasonable cause. They've been charged. Now, one by one, they will go in front of a court and plead innocent or guilty. There's one high profile one already that said innocent. Why would you do that? Because you want a trial, right? It's in his best interest to have a trial, supposedly. It's this guy here, this QAnon shaman. You'll see him here. The guy with the horns. Remember the guy with the horns? Had his face painted. So he's been charged. Now let's go through, look at some of these charges. I've actually got a better chart of this. These are the 26 and what they've been charged with. Let's see if I can give you that number. So we told you they would follow this up until they had pretty much everybody taken care of, right? That was really involved. And there was enough video evidence to get it down to the few ringleaders. And then you start looking at their background and who they talked to and did they come to do harm? This guy, assault. It's Texas. This guy, assault. This guy, conspiracy. Conspiracy is the big one. This person conspired with others to do this. Assault, alleged, allegedly. All of these people are alleged. They deserve their day in court. They should not be immediately assumed that the charges are legit. This was assault. This is conspiracy. So conspiracy, assault. And there's more charges. Usually they stack charges on top of each other. So there'll be like 3 or 4 charges, and you might be found guilty on one and not on the others, right? So this term alleged is really important, but there's 26 that have been charged with crimes and assault. And there were over 100 officers hurt, injured, and 1 died. 43 with lesser charges. And let's look at some of the charges: property crimes, weapons crimes, disrupting Congress, interfering with police officers. Then there's another 107 who were just probably swept away by the moment. We talked about that before. And this is trespassing. You weren't allowed to be in the Capitol building. You broke in. It's like breaking into somebody's home. Well, it just happens to be the people's house. So what we're talking about is a few conspirators alleged, and those that use violence, and those that just were swept along. And I don't think this whole list will ever get past a few more hundred, and it will mainly be these charges down here. Right? So this was a very small group that led this assault on our Capitol. At least that's what the evidence seems to suggest. So as we look through this, right, again, these are alleged. So we shouldn't think right now, I know this is really hard to do because it's an emotional time, but we shouldn't think any of these people are guilty until they've had their day in court, until they've had their trial. They have been charged through an indictment. That doesn't mean they're guilty. And they've got a right to lawyers and everything else, and you read about those in the amendments. All right, now, what we're now going to switch gears is what I just explained to you was a criminal trial. The courts are the only ones that can charge somebody with a crime and send them to jail, or charge them a penalty, a fine for a particular crime. What we're going to experience starting tomorrow is not a criminal trial. It's not. Nobody has to pay a fine at the end of this, and nobody goes to jail. The Congress can't send you to jail. That's separation of power stuff. Only the courts can do that. So what we have is a political trial outlined in the Constitution, clearly outlined in the Constitution. And we have 2 sides of the Congress, both to do a different job. This right here is also, listen to me very carefully, I shall say this only once. This is also separation of powers. George Washington gave us the best metaphor for this. He had a metaphor back in those days. If you had a boiling hot pot, you just pulled off the stove, or whatever, the Franklin stove, and it was really hot. You could run out in the snow, get another bucket, if you will, and you take the pot and you swirl it in the snow to cool it off quickly, right? You're making caramel, you want to cool it off quickly, whatever it happens to be. He said, the hot pot is the House. The hot pot elected every 2 years, closer to the feelings of the people, smaller districts, 435 members. They can get pretty upset about things. The Senate, on the other hand, is that cooling vessel that goes through, because they're only elected every 6 years, so they can not react to local politics, not react to the emotions of the moment. If you've got a 6-year term and you're at the beginning of that, you're a little freer than if you have a 2-year term and you're basically up for re-election and you have to run in a primary 2 years from now. So the idea that one side impeaches, this is like an indictment in court. That's all it is. It's an accusation. It's alleged. Very carefully, listen to me. It is alleged. The Senate will ultimately decide whether they acquit, which means let them go, or find them guilty. So this is the process right here. Now, it's political. Do not kid yourself. The purpose of political parties is to win elections. That's why they exist. That's why Hamilton created the first one. That's why Jefferson countered with his party, because they had to win elections in order to push forward what they wanted to do. Now, right here, you see the Gallup poll looking at the former president, who is the only president in American history never in the Gallup poll to never break 50%. Not once. Not in day one, not the last day. And he got his lowest number on his last day in office, 34%. Okay, but there's more to it than that. When you just read the top line number, you think, whoa, but read this number. You ready? Carefully? Remember, political parties are political institutions created by us under the First Amendment to win elections. Some are Democrats, some are Republicans, some don't like be part of either party, so they become independents. But let's look at the president. He was at 94% at the time of the election. And before he left, among Republicans, he dropped to 82, but that's still 82%. Republicans are only less in terms of membership, probably 20 to 25% of American voters are Republican, only about 20, 25%, a few more right now are Democrat. So they do not represent all of the American people. They represent a faction, a group, right, that are committed to the Republican Party. 82% support for the former president. So while nationally it was 34, among his party, a party that could potentially renominate him to be president again to represent their party in a primary election, it's 82%. Some are saying that it's still his political party, that he controls it basically. He's the leader. If he controls, you know, you could say control, but I'd say more the leader of it right now. Among Democrats, it's 4%. Same poll. This is the same poll. Average, Republicans 82, Democrats 4. It was never very high among Democrats, always really high among Republicans. So what about those that don't belong to the Democratic or Republican parties? Well, these are the independents. At independents, it's 30%. Among those that don't affiliate with the Democrats, don't affiliate with Republicans, but vote anyway, it was 30%. Then that's, of course, why you lose elections. If you can't get this number up to 50%, you're going to have a hard time winning. Got to get it over 50%. So the election happened. So the former president was just the third president impeached ever. First time he was impeached was for abuse of power and obstruction of justice for trying to get a foreign power to dig up dirt on his political rivals to indict Joe Biden or Hunter Biden for crimes in that country. Now, remember what an indictment is. It's an accusation. It's still alleged. But so many Americans believe that if somebody's arrested or charged, that they're guilty. So if Ukraine says, hey, we're investigating these people, allegedly did this, allegedly did that, that is a sign of guilt. Because he then asked a favor of the president named Zelensky in exchange for $300+ million of aid, military aid, and was going to hold that back. He said, I want you to do us a favor, though, in exchange for what we were going to do for you. It's called a quid pro quo. You need a quid pro quo to prove any sort of conspiracy. You do this for me, I'll do this for you. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. In all of the cases, for example, involving, oh, I don't know, crime, organized crime, you have to show that the crime boss made a deal with someone else to do a crime, a quid pro quo. That, of course, led to a spectacular Senate trial. This is, of course, I've played you this before, where Mitt Romney became, this is historical and this is important, became the only member of the president party who's being impeached ever to break ranks with their party and vote for removal. Mitt Romney is alone in history in that role. No Republican has ever voted against a Republican. No Democrat has ever voted against a Democratic president in impeachment, ever, until Mitt Romney. That right there stands him alone in history. All right, now we have this president becomes the only president in American history impeached twice. In fact, he's responsible now for 50% of impeachments in American history. This time, the charge is even more, how should I say it, a tough one. Incitement to insurrection is the exact quote from the resolution passed by the House. This is the allegation. This is the indictment. This is what they want tried in the Senate. And we played these speeches before. Let's jump ahead. House had its own rules. We talked about that. They had the impeachment January 13th. It was the most bipartisan in history. You had, I think it was what, 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. 10 Republicans break ranks with their party and vote against the president of their own party. That's new. That hasn't happened. The parties stick with their president one way or the other. That's why no president has ever been removed, because it's political in nature. Here's the vote, 232 to 197 on this latest charge. One of the third ranking member was Liz Cheney from Wyoming. She was one of those 9 that voted against the former occupant of the White House. She got censured by her home political party in Wyoming after this happened. They voted censorship against her, whatever that means. It's more or less a slap on the wrist. But this is how impeachment works, right? You have to have a vote and your votes are counted. So every single person in the House recorded a vote or an abstention. They're going to have to answer for that vote with their voters back home at some point in the next election. How did you vote and why? And so it's a public vote. It's not in secret like a grand jury hearing. It's a resolution that is passed. Here's Nancy Pelosi showing the resolution, signing it, and then according to ceremony, physically the 9 managers of this next impeachment trial marched it over to the Senate, knocked on the door, the Senate invited them in. They proclaimed that this was an impeachment and gave them the articles of impeachment. The Senate said, okay, come back on tomorrow, it'd be tomorrow, and make your case. You're the prosecuting attorney. So the House of Representatives are the prosecutors. All right, a president can also, though, assemble his own defense team. And so that defense team has been assembled, and they're going to have in the trial prosecution and defense, just like you would see in the Fifth Amendment. They asked the former president to testify as a witness. He declined. Under the Fifth Amendment, you can't be forced to testify against yourself in any way. So that was the Fifth Amendment privilege. It applies here. Who knows? But what the prosecution attorneys, 9 members of the House, are going to present is a lot of video and a lot of evidence about the actions and what drove them. This guy here is no doubt going to be important because of what interviews he did and things he posted online and so on. This is the QAnon shaman. That's what he calls himself. This guy here, right? You're going to hear two groups, Proud Boys, QAnon, as being involved in this. This is just the storming of the Capitol. Again, it was led by a few. Most people walked away. Some were swept away by the moment, made a mistake. But some people were very serious. Let's go through the list of presidents that have been either censured, not removed, not impeached. Why? Didn't have the votes. If you don't have the votes, you can't impeach. However, this president was impeached. They had the votes in the House, but not removed, saved by one vote. Nixon resigned first. He would have gone down and been impeached and removed. So he resigned first. So technically he was not impeached. So that's a great trivia question. Okay. How many presidents were impeached? What's the answer? Well, the answer is 3. All right. Impeached Clinton, but he wasn't removed either. Democrats stayed with him and Democrats stayed with Johnson. And then last time Republicans stayed with this occupant of the White House. He was impeached twice. Will he be removed? Probably not. Why? You guys know your Constitution. It takes a 2/3 vote of the Senate to convict. 2/3. So 67 votes are needed. Democrats only control 50 of those votes. Kamala Harris can't break a tie. She's not involved. The President Pro Tempore is running the meeting, and she's not involved at all in this. She has to leave the room. And this guy, who was a former head of the Republican National Committee, said, it'll take Republicans to make this happen. How many Republicans are there? Now, remember, go back to the axiom. Listen carefully. The purpose of political parties is to win elections. However, the Republican Party in the last 4 years has lost the House, the Senate, and the presidency in a 4-year span. The last time that happened was Herbert Hoover in 1932, where Republicans lost the House, the Senate, and the presidency in 4 years. So are they winning elections or not? It'll be interesting to see. But I grew up at a different era. And in my era, Democrats and Republicans got along. They didn't see each other as bad. They saw each other as, well, I like this metaphor a lot. And that was, it's like you have an offense and a defense on the same team, and you play each other in preseason, right? I know BYU has the blue-white game where the football teams practice against each other, the offense, defense. University of Utah does the same thing. Red and white go against each other, defense and whatever. But you're part of the same team, right? Ronald Reagan, who, got a lot of folks in politics, basically he wanted a big tent party. He wanted a party that included a lot of people. He said this: the person who agrees with you 80% of the time is a friend and an ally, not a 20% traitor. He had an 11th commandment: never say anything bad about your opponent in a primary election or criticize somebody in your own party. Get along. That was what he did. That's why we liked him so much. He was pretty much nice to everybody. If you make a mistake, admit it. And boy, he made a doozy. We'll maybe talk about that. Democrats are not enemies, compromise and work together. And he proved it. This guy is Tip O'Neill, the Speaker of the House, a Democrat from Massachusetts. These two got along like gangbusters. Reagan didn't control the House or the Senate, yet managed to become a great president anyway, because he could compromise, work together. These two were both Irish. They used to have great laughs together. And Tip O'Neill did a lot of things to compromise with what Ronald Reagan wanted to do, and led to some big change. It can be different than you see today. I just want you to all look up here and look at my eyes. I want you to see me when I say this. It doesn't have to be this way. We can get along and work together, like Tip O'Neill did with Ronald Reagan. Republican GOP president, Democrat Speaker of the House, worked together, found where they could agree, and got things done. Tip O'Neill is famous for a phrase, all politics is local. Look, I'm going to prove it to you right now. It's not a national thing. It's local. It's what happens at your state level. That's why we're focusing on how is the Biden administration helping Utah. He said he'd be a president for all of America. Well, Utah voted for his opponent. And yet, is he going to care about us as much as he cares about people in California or New York? He's going to prove it. Does he care about us to treat us the same? Look, this is startling. When I saw these numbers, I just shuddered. Because basically, this survey showed that the percent of Republicans and the percent of Democrats who say that Republicans or Democrats are, look at this, closed-minded, unpatriotic, immoral, lazy, and unintelligent. This is Republicans, what they say about Democrats. Democrats, what they say about Republicans, closed-minded, immoral, 47%, unintelligent, unpatriotic, and lazy. Can I just tell you, none of that's true? None of that is true. But that's what one side perceives the other side to be. Enough that they would tell a pollster, 64% closed-minded, 75% closed-minded. It's not true. But that's what people are thinking. It doesn't have to be this way. It can be like we saw in the past, right? We can work together in the end, but we have to decide to do it. But I'm afraid that the party politics is now going to create some real problems. Here it is, 82% support for the former president. Look at these states. Look at Alabama. It's Republican plus 22 in 08. I don't know what it is here, 62%. Utah was 58% Republican vote last time. It's been an R29 state, meaning leaning Republican by 29 points. That's more than in Alabama, actually, which is interesting, right? So if you're running for office in this state, how do you think you're going to vote? If you're Tuberman in Alabama, how's he going to vote? So it makes Utah interesting. Let's take the state of Nebraska. Nebraska is a plus 15. It's been a plus 27, 58%. Voted for the former president about the same as Utah did. But one of their senators is talking a lot like Mitt Romney. You know, we'll talk about him in a minute. And he got censured by his own political party back home. The Republicans censured their own senator. But you go to New York now. Let's do the flip. You go to New York, where Chuck Schumer's from, it was 60% for Joe Biden. Democrats, 4% approval here. California, 63%, even more. So if you're a senator from California, how are you going to vote? If you're a senator from New York, how are you going to vote? And when you look at trying to count 67, if you're trying to get 17 votes, right? Let me move this out of the way so you can see, get in the corner here. Okay, if you're looking for 17 votes, where are you going to get them? You might get one or maybe two out of Utah. I don't know. You might get one out of Nebraska. You're going to get this one out of Maine, probably. You might get this one out of Alaska, one of two. So far, I can only get up to maybe 5. There's one guy retiring and he may vote against. So it's only 5 and you need 17 in these red states. Who is going to break ranks if they want to get reelected again? All politics is what? Say it with me. Local. Liz Cheney, will she get reelected in Wyoming as their only member of Congress? Remember, they only have one member of the House, and she's third in leadership. We'll find out. But what we do know is every senator has signed a book. Mike Lee, here's Mitch McConnell signing the book. Here's Mitt Romney signing the book. They took an oath to be impartial jurors. Impartial. How are our two senators going to vote? What are they going to say after that vote? This is important for us. All politics is local. Mitt Romney will cast a vote. It'll be public. We'll know how he voted. Mike Lee will cast a vote. We will know how he voted. Here's what I need from you this week. Because normally we're here every day. We can show highlights, we can discuss, we can have a debate. We'd have no time for that. Lots is going to happen between classes. I need you to follow what your two senators are saying and how they vote. Follow the event, but take it from a local perspective. What's Mitt Romney saying? Now they're going to be just quiet. So there's going to be evidence presented, whatever, and they're just going to sit there as jurors, right? But then they're going to have to vote. And when they vote, they're no doubt going to make some sort of statement as to why they voted the way they did. So your assignment will be this. How did Mike Lee vote? What did he say? Basically, short summation. And what's your opinion about that? What's your thoughts on what Mike Lee did and said? Then we'll say, how did Mitt Romney vote? What did he say? Just a short synopsis. You just paraphrase him. And then what is your opinion on what he said and thought? So this will give you a chance to express your opinion about the two people in Utah that we elect to do this job for us. And in the end, that's really what it's all about. Every single senator will be on the record, and we'll have to go back to their voters back home and basically explain themselves. And if you're in Nebraska, it's going to be a different explanation than in Utah or Nevada or California or Pennsylvania and Florida. Florida will be very interesting. I really want to follow what happens there. I want to follow Ben Sasse. I want to follow Susan Collins. I want to follow Lisa Murkowski to see what they do and what they say. And do they survive re-election? Because the threat from Mitt Romney or Mike Lee is not with the Democrats. There are not enough Democrats in Utah to kick either of them out in a general election. The threat comes within their own party. It's what we call being primaried. Before you get to run officially against a Democrat in Utah for the Senate, you have to first get through primary challenges of other Republicans first. That's where the action is in Utah. For governor, for example, there were three very strong candidates that worked against each other. And finally, Cox wins the nomination. He was guaranteed to become the governor. The state is R15, Republican plus 15. Whoever wins in the primary wins. Mike Lee primaried out a powerful senator about 10 years ago named Bennett. He challenged him in the primary, did a brilliant job against that campaign. Bennett had no response, and Lee becomes the nominee for the Republicans and wins in a landslide in the fall. You win in the primaries in Utah if you want to be a senator. If you want to be a senator in Utah, you have to be a Republican, you have to win the primary, and then you are the senator before the rest of the people even get a chance to vote. When people in Utah think that their vote matters in November, no, your vote matters in the primaries. That's when it matters. And there's only one district in Utah in the House that's a swing district, and that's House District 4, where Burgess Owens is in there right now. That has flip-flopped back and forth every 2 years for the last 8 years. And it will flip-flop again because it's really close. But no other district is close. So that is your task. This is your homework. Follow Mike Lee, follow Mitt Romney, report on what they did and said in the study guide, and then give your opinion about what each person said or did. Because the next time they run for office, you will be voters. You will be voting then. I would imagine everybody in this room will be over 18 in 2 years. And you can't go back and redo a presidential election. That's done. But you can certainly decide whether or not you approve or disapprove of what your two senators did here in Utah. That is all politics being local. That is our gift. Every senator represents all the people in the state. And so they represent you. So if they're your representative and you hire them as a voter and you send them to DC, if you give them the authority, You give them a mandate. Remember that term? Are you happy with what they did? And you'll have your chance to talk about it. All right, now, bipartisanship, I don't know, maybe a thing of the past, but let me go back to when there was bipartisanship, when Democrats and Republicans actually did work together. For example, the civil rights legislation in 1964, ending the segregation in the 11 southern states, ending all the Jim Crow laws, getting the right to people vote, was bipartisan. It passed with both Democrats and Republicans. The biggest law in American history was the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that is also not a constitutional amendment, and it passed with bipartisan support. Democrats and Republicans together decided to end that in the South. In 1964, too, Barry Goldwater, a Republican very famous Republican, by the way, he'd run for president in 64. He would lose to Lyndon Johnson. But he and another senator named Rhodes, Republicans, were the ones that go over to Nixon, who was living in a little state of denial. He was drunk, he was not doing well, and he was talking to the pictures on the walls. And they basically went over and said, look, in a day or two, the House will impeach. They will bring those articles across to us in the Senate. We've already talked to all the senators, and you don't have the votes to protect you. There are more than 67 votes to convict you. So he resigned first. So this saved this rather public and humiliating trial, and it saved the country a lot of time. Nixon then resigns, does his famous salute, gets on the helicopter, and flies away. But it was people in his own party that went over and gave him the bad news. And they would have voted, both Democrats and Republicans, in a bipartisan way for Nixon for the crimes that he committed in the Watergate scandal, which, by the way, you should know, over 60 people went to jail for that worked for Nixon. Nixon didn't go to jail, though, because he was pardoned by the next president, Ford. And you know what? I've always thought and always said that, man, they should have probably not pardoned him, because then Nixon would have stood trial in a court of law for the crimes he committed, where they would have had a grand jury and a jury trial and presented evidence, and maybe Nixon would have been given jail time too. But that didn't happen, because the president who was appointed by Nixon, the only president never elected, he was replaced a vice president that was caught up in a scandal, and he was appointed under the 25th Amendment. He pardoned him. And his rationale was, we got to end this nightmare. It's taking too much time. We can't get things done because everybody's consumed with Nixon. I never much bought that argument until right now. Now I get it. This is not what Joe Biden wants to take up the time in the Senate. He wants to pass legislation in order to get through this pandemic and to fix the economy. And this is taking up the Senate's time. He can't get his appointments through as fast, and he can't get his laws through it fast. It's interrupting his efforts to fix things. So I don't know. But what I do know is that we're in for a very rocky few days where the emotions are going to be high once again. Basically, here's the thing. History is the witness that testifies to the passing of time. This is a moment in time, a lesson to be learned that you and your generation are going to have to apply to the future. So take away the lessons of your leaders, your two senators, learn from them, and then write your own thoughts on what they're trying to teach you. Because this moment in time, as Cicero said back 2,000 years ago, will illuminate reality. It will visualize your memory. You will not forget the attack on the Capitol, nor will you forget this trial at a time when we really need to be focused on other things, ending this pandemic, getting the economy back, and getting our schools back 100%. Nevertheless, these moments give us guidance in our daily lives and brings us the tidings of, he said, antiquity, meaning the past. Because trust me, sometime in your lifetime, There will be other instances of things that happen that you need to be informed and ready to deal with. And that's why I want you to write this essay. I want you to express yourself. I want you to think it through so that you can have those lessons, this visualization, this guidance for the future that you can pass on to the next generation. So this is kind of an important moment in American history, and there's no getting around it. There's no avoiding it. I would love to avoid this. I would love to be talking about the Greeks right now and all sorts of vocabulary, but history has gotten in the way. And this is the biggest history in the history of the presidency when it comes to checks and balances. This is unprecedented. It's never happened before. And let's hope we never get to this point again, that we can get back to working together, not hating each other, not using names, being nice, and listening to each other on both sides, and taking into account other people's thoughts and feelings as being at least as valid as our own. And so I want you to listen to Mike Lee. I want you to listen to Romney. I want you to draw your own conclusions, but I need you to listen to both of them. That's really what this class is all about. Listening and learning and drawing your own conclusions. So I'll be more interested in this next assignment, which will be given as soon as the trial's over and as soon as we have the vote and the comments. So it could be next week, could be week after, could be Friday. Then this to me is the biggest one in my career in 42 years. The most important assignment I've ever given. All right, we'll catch you guys later. Let's sign out for now, and I'll get this recorded for the students at home.